Greetings and salutations, friends, and welcome back. So today I thought we would cover some recent news, which many in the UFO community are talking about, and that is that one-time witness to the Travis Walton abduction, Mike Heston Rogers, has recanted his support of the story. Recently posting a message on Facebook, and there's like hundreds of replies to it, which I find interesting. But the post reads, I, Michael Rogers, being of sound and rational mind, do hereby give notice that I am no longer to be considered a witness to Travis C. Walton's supposed abduction of November 5th, 1975. And for those who are not very familiar with the Travis Walton case, it's one of probably the, between abduction, UFO abduction, alien abduction cases, I would say the two most popular or talked about are the Barney and Betty Hill case and the Travis Walton UFO incident. I'm reading directly from Wikipedia here, and just giving a brief overview of the event. The Travis Walton incident was an alleged alien abduction of American forestry worker Travis Walton by a UFO on November 5th, 1975, while he was working in the Apache Stilt Graves National Forests near Snowflake, Arizona. Walton was missing for 5 days and 6 hours after days of searching with scent dogs and helicopters. Walton says he reappeared by the side of the road near Heber, Arizona. The Walton case received mainstream publicity and remains one of the best-known alien abduction stories, while skeptics consider it a hoax. Walton wrote a book about his proposed abduction in 1978 called The Walton Experience, which was adapted into the 1993 Hollywood film Fire in the Sky. So yeah, this is one of the most talked about, most popular alien abduction stories. And there's several reasons, I think, for that. First of all, the popularity of it, having received a Hollywood movie about the event, certainly popularized him to a pretty extreme degree. And Mr. Walton has been making the rounds at UFO conferences and Alien Con, Contact in the Desert, all the biggest conferences for decades now. I have never covered this case, mostly because I considered this case to be neither provable or disprovable. And that's a problem with the great number of supposed UFO cases, let alone UFO alien abduction cases. The few things that stand out about Travis Walton's case is most usually alien abduction people claim the event took place over several hours, but Mr. Travis Walton's event actually took place over 5 days and 6 hours. He was gone for 5 days and 6 hours. As I recall, he was returned malnourished and suffering from dehydration. What else can I tell you about the case, except that, like a lot of these cases, this one has problems. First of all, supporters of the case, including Travis Walton, are very quick to point out, and they did so in the movie, well, the logging crew and Travis Walton all passed lie detector tests. But that's not quite accurate. In fact, the first lie detector test was issued to Mr. Travis Walton, arranged by the National Enquirer, who he had sold his story rights to just days after the event. That gives me pause and makes me suspicious. You just suffered this traumatic, life-changing event, and you're talking to the National Enquirer and selling your story already? Also, many people close to Travis Walton, in the form of friends or family, have stated on the record that Travis Walton had a keen interest in UFOs before this event. He's claimed that he didn't, but others claim that he did. That gives me a good deal of suspicion. If we go to the Rational Wiki about Travis Walton, we see problems with the story. Walton and some of his family members believed they'd seen numerous UFOs over the years and were obsessed with the idea of alien contact. Another problem with the story: as a UFO enthusiast, Walton would have been aware the National Enquirer offered a $5,000 reward for positive proof of an extraterrestrial encounter. Interestingly, Walton and the other crew members divided the $5,000 prize and gave exclusive story rights to the Enquirer. Another problem with the story is that Walton's medical exams and initial failed but kept secret polygraph tests were set up and paid for by the National Enquirer. So, anytime you hear Travis Walton or a supporter of his say, well, he passed lie detectors, he's taken a whole bunch of lie detectors. I believe 6 at last count. And he failed at least 2 of them. Take from that what you will. But, we've visited this sort of problem that I have with people claiming polygraph evidence in the Bob Lazar case. In Bob Lazar's case, he passed 4 lie detector tests. No, he didn't. He failed the first one and then took a few more. And you don't just keep taking polygraph tests until you get the results you want. You get one shot at it by an accredited, qualified polygraph examiner. If you fail, you fail. You don't just keep taking polygraphs. So, I have a real problem with this. A real problem with this story. Now, I'm going to check in with some things that I need to share here. I'm going to share Mike Heston's Rogers statement here. So just bear with me, friends. I'm going to cite fair use, even though this is a public Facebook page. And for those unaware, this gentleman was the boss of the logging crew and the person driving the vehicle. He has always backed up Mr. Travis Walton's story. That is until recently. And we can get into what changed, but for now, let's just look at his actual statement. 1 second, let me see if we can get that bigger. There we go. So friends, 1 second, let me fix my background here. I always forget to do that. So I, Michael Rogers, being of sound and rational mind, do hereby give notice that I am no longer to be considered a witness to Travis C. Walton's supposed abduction of November 5th, 1975. Now it's interesting that Mr. Rogers, boy that sounds funny to say, Mr. Rogers, yeah, not that Mr. Rogers, this Mr. Rogers, Michael H. Rogers, has written a bunch of books. He has written a bunch of books related to alien contact, UFOs, and things like that. And also, I believe, and I have substantial and supportive evidence of this, that Mr. Michael Rogers has benefited financially from Travis Walton's story on multiple occasions. In other words, he got cut in on the deal when Travis Walton sold the story, accepted the prize from the National Enquirer for $5,000. He split some off to Mr. Michael Rogers. Now, if we are to assume that this was all a hoax just to generate money, that's a motive to me. Additionally, when Travis Walton sold his story to the National Enquirer, also gave some money to Michael Rogers. Was that for being a witness and for helping prop up the story? Maybe. Now, there is a very extremely long thread here after he posted this on Facebook. And the waters get muddy because people ask him, are you saying the event never happened? No, I didn't say the event never happened. Are you saying that you didn't witness the abduction of Travis Walton? And he says, no, none of us witnessed the abduction of Travis Walton. But if you go by the story, Travis Walton got hit by a beam of light out of the spaceship, and then those guys turned tail and ran. They thought he was dead. So they didn't actually see aliens taking him into a spaceship or anything like that. Part of the way down in this thread, though, it seems that we get to the meat of why Mr. Michael H. Rogers has suddenly had a change of heart and no longer wants to be associated as a witness to Travis C. Walton's supposed abduction of November 5th, 1975. And that is that Travis Walton is making a new movie deal and tried to conceal it from him. Now, this certainly is opinion and speculation, but one could speculate that Mr. Michael H. Rogers is not very happy that he's not getting a piece of the next movie deal, right? And suddenly decided, since he's not getting a piece of the money, he's recanting being a witness to this event. That he, by the way, has been a witness to this event for decades now. So when it financially suits him to be a witness to the event, he does. Suddenly, Travis Walton is making side deals with new movies and not telling Mr. Michael H. Rogers, and suddenly he has a problem with this situation. More evidence that this story is a concocted money-making scam. And there is substantial and supportive evidence of this stuff. Yes, Cal Corp is here. They likely did their hoax to get out of woodcutting contract. You're absolutely right, because apparently Walton's supposed abduction provided the much-needed act of God in the contract that enabled logging contractor Mike Rogers to avoid costly penalties due to the crew falling far behind schedule in that contract. More problems with the story. Many have pointed out that Walton and Rogers could have worked together to fool the rest of the queue, easily rigging up some glowing light or other prop to make the other five think they've seen an alien or a UFO spaceship. Also, a big problem I have with the story, and that is when the Walton family is faced with embarrassing questions, the entire Walton family decided that they would only talk to people who did not doubt the abduction by aliens story. Mr. Travis Walton going so far as to instruct family members to not speak to any members of the media until he had vetted them and decided whether or not he and his family would speak to them. In other words, if you're kind to my story and you're going to tell it my way, I'll talk to you and give you an interview. If you're skeptical and want to ask very hard, important questions like why, Travis Walton, are you claiming you passed lie detector tests when you failed the first one given to you, right? Or other blaringly obvious problems with this story. If people are going to ask questions, hardball questions, Travis Walton will not talk to them. He will not allow himself to be interviewed by highly skeptical people asking hard questions. Never has, even gone as far as to instruct his family to not speak to any member of the media until he had approved that they could, right? That's more than a little bit problematic. Okay, Victor Calero just finished a 1-hour interview with Mike Rogers on Skype, literally 10 minutes ago. Yeah, so what's the gist of what is he saying then? Because in this Facebook posts, he is pretty vague. Like, are you saying that the event never happened? I didn't say that. Are you saying that you didn't witness the abduction? We never witnessed an abduction. You know, this sort of, he's talking out of both sides of his mouth. The gist that I got from the Facebook thread, though, is that he's pissed off because Travis Walton is making a new movie deal and did not share that information with him. So is this situation completely and totally just over money? Why does a guy who's been telling the same story for 40 years suddenly change his story right after Travis Walton tries to make a movie deal and not let him in on that movie deal? This, my friends, to me, is substantial and supportive evidence that this is all a money-making scam, right? And by the way, Travis Walton, how much money does Travis Walton need to make? I'm told that he got a 7-figure deal from the producer of the Hollywood movie Fire in the Sky. And of course, 7 figures, that would mean $1 million or more, right? He's had to have made probably another million selling his book since 1978. Oh, okay. So now Victor is saying he just finished interviewing. He believes the story, but got angry at Travis because he didn't share book money with him. And apparently, also, Victor, there is another Hollywood movie deal in the works that he is not going to be sharing with Mr. Mike Rogers. Yes. All Around Arbiter says Travis Walton wants to control the narrative. The truth should never fear investigation, and he shouldn't fear softball questions, or you mean hardball questions, if he's being truthful. I agree. He should allow himself to be interviewed by anyone. Oh, here we go. Cal Korff chimes in. He failed his urine test, proving he was not without food for 5 days. Analysis proved that he had eaten. Maybe the aliens gave him some bananas, Cal Korff, some alien bananas. You don't know. Why so skeptical, Cal Korff? Maybe the aliens gave him, like, an alien Hungry Man dinner. Maybe they got the equivalent of a Hungry Man dinner, right? This is extremely suspect to me, the whole thing. Like, he always claims that he went without food and water for 5 days, right? First of all, if you go without water for 5 days, you're probably going to die, right? And again, as the story goes, he was extremely malnourished and dehydrated when found after the aliens dropped him back off. But according to Cal Korff, the urine test proves that he was not without food for 5 days. So what was he eating? Alien food? Is that compatible with human digestives? I don't know. See? Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Victor is correcting me. He got $100,000 for the movie Fire in the Sky. I heard he'd gotten $1 million. Maybe he got some of the back end and it added up to $1 million. The film did very well, Victor. I'm not sure. But, you know. Victor Calero also says the book Fire in the Sky sells for $45 and costs $3 to make. Mike says Travis sold 2,000 copies. I would venture to guess, Victor, that he has sold a lot more than 2,000 copies. First of all, he's been selling that book on the UFO circuit at every UFO conference he appears at since the 70s. So I think he's sold a hell of a lot more than 2,000 copies. Plus now we have things like, you know, Amazon and Lulu and all these other places that you can purchase books online for very little, you know, high profit to the author. He was just on Joe Rogan. I bet you his appearance on Joe Rogan alone just sold him 2,000 copies of that book. But again, that's opinion and speculation. Cal Korff says nothing non-Earth or unknown showed up in chemical analysis. Yeah. This is a problem. Brock is asking if close encounters are real. So this is a problem. When these storytellers get confronted with actual science, right, that could disprove them, you know, they have a big problem. But back to the subject of lie detectors. This is great. Back to the subject. So I'm reading from an article in Skeptic Blog by Michael Shermer, you know, a well-known UFO skeptic. Okay, so it says, although Walton passed a polygraph test arranged by a UFO organization, he's talking about Philip Klass. Philip Klass learned that Walton dictated to the examiner what questions would be asked. Further investigation by Klass led him to an earlier unpublished polygraph test of Walton conducted by Jack McCarthy, one of the top 8 polygraph examiners in Arizona. McCarthy gave Klass his assessment of Walton's story, gross deception. He added that Walton employed polygraph countermeasures, such as holding his breath. Now, 33 years later, and this article is quite old, it's from 2008, Walton was once again in the polygraph hot seat. His affirmative answer to my question passed the truth test because, of course, Walton believes he has evidence in the form of his friend's corroborative story. The next question for $100,000 was refreshingly straightforward, and this is from a television show that took place, of course, the Moment of Truth television show. And they basically offered him $1 million prize, and he failed. So the next question for $100,000 was refreshingly straightforward. Were you abducted by a UFO on November 5th, 1975? Without hesitation, Travis Walton barked yes, but the voice in the sky once again boomed. That answer is false. I couldn't believe it, neither could Walton, whose jaw dropped faster than a crashed flying saucer. At last, after a best-selling book and popular film about his abduction, Fire in the Sky, after countless UFO conferences and media appearances, it took a Fox reality television show to bring a case to a head. What does this mean? To be fair and balanced, probably nothing, because the polygraph test is unreliable. Yeah. And Travis Walton says, I would not normally have ever agreed to be on such a show. After my fellow crewmen and I passed polygraph tests from the Arizona State Police polygraph examiner, I wrote in my book that I was done addressing that aspect of it. And Travis Walton goes on to claim that they used deceptive practices to administer the test, and that no other polygraph examiner would agree with their methods. And again, he got caught. He failed on national television. He failed a polygraph with a very simple question. Were you abducted by a UFO in 1975? He said yes. The polygraph examiner determined that was a lie. And now, after claiming about, he's been talking about the reliability, how important his polygraph evidence is. He passed all these polygraphs, right? Then when he fails a polygraph, he starts talking about how unreliable polygraph exams are and how they're not admissible in court, right? So again, this is the double speak of one of these grifters, as I see it, is when the evidence supports my bullshit, I'm going to say how great it is. And when the same exact method of obtaining evidence proves me a liar, I'm going to say that's not good evidence, that's unreliable. This is why I've never covered this event. It's because we can't really, he passed polygraphs. Well, he failed a few. Yeah, he passed a few, but he failed a few too, right? Brock Landers believes that Walton was taken by a human ET, a hybrid human ET group. Well, he did claim that he saw gray type aliens and Nordic or human type aliens, right? Yes. Travis and Rogers staged it, and the others were first innocent witness to the light behind trees. Yeah, all they saw was a light in the trees, and they apparently saw Travis Walton get hit by a beam of light and fall down, and they ran away. Because that's what you do when your friend is being attacked by aliens in the middle of a forest. You hightail it out of there. Later they went back, right? And one of the other indicators that the story is false and made up garbage is that Travis Walton's own mother was completely unconcerned with his disappearance, stating that the aliens would not harm him. I don't know about you, but if a bunch of my friends went and told my mom that an alien UFO flying saucer, shot a light beam at me and then abducted me and I disappeared, my mother would be a little concerned if I'd been gone for 5 days. His mother, not at all concerned. Maybe they let her in on it. I'm going to go high. People have speculated about this for quite some time. Travis Walton, I'll give him this much credit. He was an outdoorsman, a woodsman, right? He was a logger. You mean to tell me that a logger couldn't go, bush camp for 5 days in the woods and not be found? Of course he could. You know, that was the other piece of evidence. Well, the police had dogs and they weren't able to find him. You know how easy it is to break the scent of a dog? You walk through a creek, the dog can't find your scent after that, right? It's not hard to evade scent dogs. That's not evidence, right? That's not evidence that he was in an alien spaceship for 5 days. But people will throw that out there. Well, the police had dogs. They couldn't find him, right? They totally lost his scent. Okay, there's 100 explanations for that don't involve aliens and ETs and an abduction. I did not know this. So Victor Calero offered him money for the interview and he refused. We're talking about Mike Rogers, so give him props for that. Yeah, I'm going to, if you could get me his contact information besides Facebook, Victor, we'd like to have him come on here. Wow, so there you go. Mike says, though, that he won't say that Travis was abducted and he has no proof of that. But that's definitely a change in his story because he was an ardent supporter of the whole story while he was making the money, Victor. While he was getting cut in on the money, he was right there to help support the story. And it looks to me that this whole situation, Victor, is now about money. He's getting cut out of the new money for the new Hollywood remake of Fire in the Sky, I suppose, or they'll call it something else. And he's not happy, right? Apparently, it would appear to me that if he was still cut in on the money, he would have never changed his story or come out with this. So this is, to me, this is evidence of this being a fabrication and a manufactured story to generate money. I didn't know he ever did that. Travis is a fraud as he went on third phase moon. Big go. Reputation gone. Yeah. And I think I'm going to share my fair use banner here, and we're going to listen in on a little bit of his Travis Walton story. So we'll be sharing a video, we'll be critiquing and discussing a video. This is a transformative work. We're educating the public, and we'll be discussing and critiquing the video we are sharing, and this is covered by fair use and allowable by law. So I'm citing fair use here. Okay, 1 second, friends, bear with me.
This is Travis Walton, the world's most famous UFO abductee. The story he's about to tell me will blow your mind. I'm Jonathan Legg on a road less traveled adventure in the mysterious state of Arizona. I visited Biosphere 2 outside of Tucson, a self-contained mini world that replicates our planet. A trip to Meteor Crater suggests that we might need to build these biospheres on Mars to save our race if the big one comes. But Arizona gets more than just rocks from space. The Mutual UFO Network has cataloged a heap of strange occurrences, but none stranger than the story I'm about to hear from this man.
Travis, you came to just down the road here from your experience.
Yeah.
And you come to consciousness, and what do you remember?
Well, I woke up, and it was cold out there, and I came pretty clear-headed immediately, but there was a light above me, and I looked to see where that light was coming from, but it went off just as I shifted my gaze in that direction, but I could see the bottom.
And interesting that the town that looks like a diner that they showed is all in on the aliens. They got an alien on the roof and a showroom inside about the event. So it's always interesting to me when these people try to profit from these stories. It's not just them profiting, it's everybody around them. If they can make a buck, they're going to make a buck. It's in the middle of Arizona, in the middle of nowhere. They got nothing going on, but people visit the site because of this story.
Bottom of this craft, that in the dark, hovering there for just a second before it shot up into the sky.
Travis Walton claims he was abducted by aliens while clearing brush in the forest. He was with a team who all support his story.
Now, did you always feel like, I know what happened, I was abducted, or
Oh,
did
yeah.
you go through a period of time where you thought, am I crazy? Did I consume some weird mushroom in the forest? Or
Well, before I had any contact with my crewmates, the sheriff was putting out this theory that the crew might have slipped me drugs or hit me over the head or something and caused some kind of delusion. But once I found out that they had seen what I'd seen, then there was no doubt. I had medical tests that proved there were no drugs in my body.
and I,
Yeah, I don't know about that. And also, it's interesting how quickly the narrative is going to change now, because now at least one member of this logging party is not in support of his story. And additionally, I think it's kind of telling that he's going to cite the medical tests that support his story, right? Like, oh, I didn't have any drugs in my system. But the same medical tests prove that you did have food during that 5-day period you claimed you went without food and water.
and I've talked to the folks around town. They say not one of you in your group has ever changed your story. You've passed multiple polygraphs.
Yeah.
And of course, he's not going to mention that he's also failed multiple polygraphs. This is how these stories are framed. And again, he's only sitting down with this guy because this guy is going to support his narrative, his story. If this guy was asking him hardball questions, or if this guy did a Google search level of research, he would have found that Travis Walton failed several polygraph tests and asked him about it. To me, that's a responsibility of a good interviewer. I should mention that I have reached out to Mr. Walton on 3 different occasions requesting an interview, and each time got ignored. Take from that what you will, but in full disclosure, I want to mention that.
I passed 5 tests from 3 different examiners.
Travis agrees to take me to the spot of his abduction, deep in the forest.
So the craft was actually right over here.
Yeah, like the crest of the ridge.
Did you crept up and you kind of crouched down to get a look at what was going on?
Yeah, well, it was up at an angle like this, and those guys were really getting really anxious and screaming at me and everything. And then when it suddenly got louder and started to move, I jumped for cover, and the only cover was this log that was sticking up there, and I got down behind the log, and then when I stood up to run back, bam, that's when it hit me.
Do you remember that blast as the spaceship took off?
No, I just felt this numbing shock. And
Next thing you know, you wake up, you're on the ship.
yeah,
Travis goes on to show me strange growth rings on the trees around the UFO site.
When it comes to getting a mortgage, how can you...
Sorry, friends. Let's try that again. Oh, that's the end of the video. Sorry, that was just a clip that we were sharing. So there's strange growth rings in the trees. I've seen growth rings like that in multiple trees. There's nothing strange about them. This is, again, more, let's tack on some bullshit to try to tell our story. It doesn't offer any, it's not like they have scientific studies of those trees to determine that there was some alien thing that caused them to grow weird. No. It's just look, there's strange growth rings on the trees. Really? Okay, let's have an arborist look at it and tell us if that's out of the ordinary. But they don't do that. They never do that. Bailey Stoner. Yeah, I mean, I've read a lot of different stories. She's asking if there are any abduction stories you actually believe. Well, before Cal Korff, I believed the Betty and Barney Hill. But after Cal Korff, not so much. The star map falls apart. And they too got paid for television movies being made about their experience, books. Their niece is still writing books about them and profiting. So, a lot of these things just come down to profit. I, of course, have read a lot about Whitley Strieber's experiences, which I don't find very credible because he keeps tacking on new ones. As time goes on, he needs to write another book, and suddenly he has a new experience with an alien. Do I believe that some are credible? Yes. And I certainly believe that some people having abduction experiences believe that their experiences are genuine and alien related, and they are not manufacturing the story. They at least believe that their story is true. So, you know, but it's interesting to me to see that even all the evidence that we talked about tonight that the story is a fabrication, people still believed it. And maybe now, though, with this other person coming out and sort of recanting his story, but is he really recanting his story, or is he just saying, I'm no longer going to help? I'm no longer going to help him sell the story if I am no longer going to profit from it. Isn't it funny how that works? While he was profiting from Travis Walton's stories, he was fine with supporting Travis Walton's claim of being abducted by aliens. But suddenly, when he's cut out of the money, he's no longer comfortable supporting his story, and he's being very vague about, you know, do you still believe he was abducted? We didn't see him abducted. Do you believe him? That's not for me to say, right? It's very wishy-washy. Gail Korf here in the Facebook Live comments says, hey, Stephen, just an FYI, but an expose on the Walton fraud is being added to the Ufology Full Easy series, UFO Comp. It's part of Wave 2, which includes the Lazar expose. 7 more titles. Be in touch soon. I'll tell Melissa you said hello. Yeah, good, do that. Okay, so I'll turn my attention to the live chat. Brandon says the most credible are the astronauts. Yeah, I find them to be pretty believable, right? And Edgar Mitchell was a big believer in all this stuff. He believed that Roswell really happened, and a lot of things. Bailey Stoner mentions that MK trickery may be involved. Let me get your first comment there. Whether there are actually aliens there, I think so. But it's more rare than even honest people thinking they saw them. And the rest are MK Ultra trickery. Yeah, I'm not sure that I believe that the government would go through the expense of trying to fake alien abductions, as many people, including Dr. Stephen Greer and others, have asserted. I'm not sure that that's a valid, real reality, right? I don't know. Our government has done some pretty crazy things, though. Look up Operation Midnight Climax. That's one of my favorite ones, where they got hookers to dose guys with high levels of LSD just to see what would happen, right? But to go then from that to, hey, let's trick these people into thinking that aliens are abducting them. And if you listen to Greer, it gets ridiculous. They have biomechanical androids that look like aliens and act like aliens, right? Michelangelo says, Stryber's stories are a convoluted mess. Yeah, when you take them, if you just read Communion, it's a pretty good story. But then if you've got to follow up, and you've got to read all the other books that he wrote after Communion was such a huge commercial success, and he literally has made millions from that book, right? So, of course he comes out with sequels to the book with all new alien experiences that he had after he wrote the first book. To me, that's incredibly convenient. And it's also interesting that Whitley Strieber was a very well-known fiction writer and even wrote Hollywood screenplays like The Howling, werewolf movie. That was Whitley Strieber. He's a writer. He makes stories for a living. And to me, maybe this is just a story to sell books. Yeah. Ron Patton says, beware the painful and torturous alien anal probe. It will cause PTSD and make you anal retentive. Yeah. Bailey Stoner says, the government isn't faking aliens via LSD experimentation, then I am a real abductee. Maybe. And Jay Roach chimes in and says, aerial school encounter still to this day has kept me a believer. That's a great, we're going to cover that here, Jay Roach. I just have, I've got a whole folder of stuff on that aerial school encounter. For those that don't know, in Africa, a bunch of children saw aliens land in a spaceship and get out and interacted with them, and they've all stuck to their story. The teachers as well. Incredible story, and incredible that years later, decades later, those witnesses still believe that what they saw was an alien spacecraft and aliens. Don Crazeface says Whitley is a drama queen. I tried to interview him. He didn't return my calls. Or yeah. And I, you know what? I try to not hold it against people when they won't agree to an interview, because I know it's time and we're not a huge show here. So, but I do. A little bit I do. I'm like, fuck that guy. Too good for me to interview him, right? Bailey Stoner says, if you give me the story that the government abducted me for some unknown reason or gave me drugs versus the story that aliens abduct me, the first is more likely. Yeah, Occam's razor, I suppose. Brandon also mentions the 1942 Battle of Los Angeles. I like that case as well. But I really think it's more likely that that was a Japanese balloon bomb, because we heard about Japanese balloon bombs later, or something like that, right? Something terrestrial and not alien. Yet, if it was a balloon, that doesn't make sense either, because the military fired at it many times and were unable to bring it down. If it was simply a balloon, they would have easily been able to bring a balloon down, which is one of those cases. That's why people think it must have been an alien, because they were shooting like hell at it and they couldn't bring it down. Victor says, I don't believe the Walton story, but it has an interesting interview with Mike Rogers, particularly the discussion about the dynamics between people involved in the Walton story. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that some of these guys, still support his story. But the first question I would ask Mr. Walton is, how much money is he given to those other witnesses over the years of his story? And if he's given any money to them, why? Right? Is it so that they keep helping you sell the story? To me, that would be the only explanation, right? It makes no sense to me why they got to split all the money, unless he needs them to sell the story. All right, and just some shout outs. We've got Victor Calero here, Cal Corpus here, the Out There channel is here, Pseudo Lucian is here, Steph is here, Brock Landers is here, we saw Bailey Stoner is here. I'm trying to see who else. Who did I miss? All Around Arbiter is here. Eileen Ebony is here and says, hello, I thought Travis Walton was the real thing. Yeah, I did for a while as well, but I no longer believe that. Shout out to CV Lindo Parado. Shout out to Jay Roach is here. Shout out to Brandon GT is here. Shout out to Judy Yeager is here. Shout out to Andrew Masonette is here. Let's see if I missed anybody. If I missed anybody, let me know in the live chat. Oh, Michael Angelo is here. Kenny Smith is here. The Don Craze Phase is here. Yeah, so we've got a full-on great audience tonight, which is surprising. This is a rare late show, and that's, my wife says it's my fault. My kids were, they had the crazies. I have a 4 and 8-year-old son, and sometimes they just get the crazies, and they're going to run around screaming and laughing. And they did that for a few hours tonight, and I tried to wait it out, and I fell asleep while waiting it out. So eventually, they tired themselves out, and I could do a show without the sound of a circus in the background. You know, sometimes I'm at the mercy of my children here, and I can just do the show when I can do the show. So that's what happened today, which is the reason for the late show. We started at midnight here today. I'm not sure if I mentioned the shout out to Michael Angelo is here. I think I got everybody with a shout out. So there you go. Yeah, so it's interesting to me that this guy is changing his story, and it's really clear, at least to me, and I know that's speculation, but come on. Suddenly he gets cut out of a movie deal and he no longer wants to be a witness, right? That's convenient. It's like, hey, bro, you cut me out of the money, so I'm not helping you sell this story anymore. And that is the gist of what I would say happened here in this situation with a guest, or I'm sorry, with a longtime witness to the event suddenly changing his tune. PBR Street Gang is here. Shout out to PBR Street Gang. Stryber was on Heather Wade's radio show, and I called and told him to find a new hobby, and he went off for like 5 minutes. Oh, I got to find a clip of that, PBR Street Gang. I would like to see that. Renee Miss Jonaside is here. Shout out to Renee Miss Jonaside saying, just saw this. Yeah, we're doing a rare late show because my children were nutty and screaming earlier. And sometimes, Miss Jonaside, I just know to let them go. Like, I'm not going to, because if I don't, I get upset. Like, come on, I got to do a show. You just got to calm down. And then they don't. You know, they'll go to another room but get even louder. So I'm at the mercy of children here. I just give up. I just go, okay, well, they're going to tire themselves out and, you know, fall asleep eventually. And I'll do the show then and not worry so much about the sounds of a circus or, you know, people being tortured in the room next to where I'm doing the show. Al Angela says, Heather Wade is rotten. I'm not sure. I don't think I'm a fan. I think I have encountered her work a few times and was less than impressed. But I may be confusing her with somebody else. Bailey Stoner, am I the only one who thinks MUFON feels like some kind of federal op? My experience with them is really weird. Not a fan of MUFON. There have been several investigators who said, we've got material, can we get this material tested? MUFON wasn't even interested. They didn't want to provide the funds. No, we don't want to test that material that may have come from an alien spacecraft. Come on, your whole thing is to investigate these things. Why would you ignore an investigator who's telling you that he has crash materials and can we get them tested? They ignored him. And I think that speaks volume. That and their, you know, the guy who runs that organization getting popped for, what was it? Solicitation of a minor for sex, right? Paul Cargo is here. Shout out to Paul Cargo. Logging is hardcore and dangerous, and I do not believe 5 loggers would leave their coworker for dead. At least one would have wanted to help. Yeah, I agree with you. You don't leave your bro in a forest to die. Somebody would have did something. I think MUFON is actually trying to get info on who abductees are and not get info on the actual event. They have been caught suppressing useful information. Or, Bailey Stoner, they've been caught selling the information to Bob Bigelow. And the reports we're supposed to get, were supposed to be confidential. So when people gave their story to MUFON, it was supposed to be confidential. They sold those confidential reports to Bob Bigelow. Not to be trusted. Postmark, shout out to Postmark, asks, where can I read the news about the Travis Walton witness? Well, we covered it pretty well today. But there's not much to say, or you can go on Facebook and just look up Mike Heston Rogers. Mike, M-I-K-E, Heston, H-E-S-T-O-N, Rogers, R-O-G-E-R-S. And he's got a public profile, and you can read the thread, which will probably leave you about as confused as I was after reading the entire thing, because it's just, he's very wishy-washy, and he goes back and forth whether he still supports the story or not, whether he believes Travis Walton was abducted by aliens or not. It's very wishy-washy at this point. Maybe this is a negotiation tactic, and suddenly Mr. Michael H. Rogers will have another change of heart after he and Travis talk about the money, right? Let's talk about the money, Mr. Travis Walton, before I support your bullshit story for another 10 years, right? Maybe he's got to get the money right first. Brandon says, what's spooky is billions of UFO sightings, but they won't communicate. No radio contact. Yeah, that is strange. But then some have communicated, right? Or attempted to communicate. And if we are to believe some of these alien contactee stories, you know, they pick special people and to talk to. But it's funny to me that a lot of those people, you know, when you look into their background, are former criminals, right? Like, why do aliens love criminals, right? Why does the secret space program love criminals, right? Pedophiles, murderers, right? Burglars, right? Why does the secret space program always pick criminals to be a part of the secret space force, right? That's a little suspect to me, right? And there have been many different examples of these people making up these stories where when you look into their background, you know, for example, one was I don't want to say convicted pedophile, he was a court-martialed pedophile, right? He got court-martialed while he was in the service for sex with an underage child. Or molesting an underage child. It's been a while since I looked at those court documents, so forgive me if I'm misspeaking. And then we have Mark Richards, who's being touted by Kerry Cassidy, is in prison for murdering someone and has been in prison for murdering someone for 35 years, right? But he's a member of the secret space program, right? And there are other examples of people with less than trustworthy backgrounds, right? Who have criminal convictions in their past that suddenly decided that they were a member of the secret space program and went on space missions, right? And fought space aliens, right? Why does the secret space program love criminals, right? But if you talk to a believer, they'll go, well, that's so they can be discredited if they tell their stories. Okay. And yeah, and the same thing, like Bob Lazar, he's a physicist, right? He's a senior staff level physicist, but one day he just woke up and said, you know what? This science stuff is boring. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to open a whorehouse, right? I'm just going to open a whorehouse because that's what scientists do, is open whorehouses, right? Hey, I guess scientists love whores as much as the next guy, right? So Bob Lazar one day just decided he was going to go partners, right, with a madam and you know, run a whorehouse. He was convicted for that. Yeah. So a lot of these people that are out there trying to profit from stories surrounding aliens, the secret space program, alien abductions, are criminals, literal criminals, right? And by the way, I'm not saying that about Travis Walton. Near as I can tell, Travis Walton does not have any criminal convictions that I'm aware of. I'm just saying that there is a large percentage of these people telling these alien stories that when you do look into their background, you find out that there's some form of criminality in their past, and in some cases in their very recent past, right? I don't think that is a coincidence, and in fact, I think that it is an indictment against this whole field. That so many of these people are criminals and allowed to profit. Like, you want to be booked at a UFO conference, even though, you know, we know that you're a pedophile? Sure. We'll book you. We'll give you a speaking fee. We'll let you sell your books at our conferences, even though we know that you molest children, right? And, Wendell Stevens is the most famous case of that. Everybody knew that Wendell Stevens was a twice convicted pedophile. Everybody knew. Well, I don't want to say everybody. Most in the UFO community knew that he was a twice convicted pedophile. People booked him for conferences. People paid him to be in documentaries, give speeches about UFOs and aliens anyway. And I'm sorry, but a convicted criminal is not trustworthy, right? And you know who is even less trustworthy? A convicted pedophile. Can't even trust the guy around kids. You're going to trust him telling stories about aliens, right? That's crazy. Yeah, somebody's mentioning David Jacobs' books. Not sure, but do not automatically disbelieve him. He is adamant about his angle. Yeah, according to him, the aliens are taking over Earth, Don Craze Phase. What are we going to do? And Dolan's throwing out these, fucking... Come on, Richard Dolan, with your clickbait garbage. The earth will be theirs. This world will be theirs. That's what Dolan is pushing that guy, right? Because he got an interview with him. I can't get an interview with that guy, even though we're both from Philadelphia, right? I would think you would help a fellow Philadelphian out and give me an interview, David Jacobs. But I've got some hard questions for you. Oh, and David Jacobs had, sexual issues with one of his patients, right? But we're not supposed to talk about that. We're not supposed to talk about a guy having issues with one of his alien abductee, patients. Again, it means he's less than credible to me. On Craze Phase, I'm a big fan of John Mack. Yeah, I'm definitely a bigger fan of John Mack than I am of David Jacobs. I think David Jacobs got some problems, not the least of which some kind of sexual weirdness going on with his so-called hypnotic regression patients, right? And again, I'm not one to... I don't want to shit all over hypnotic regression therapy for sure, but why do so many of these people only remember their alien abduction experiences once they're, undergoing hypnosis? And it's usually with somebody like David Jacobs, who has made a full-time living selling alien shit for 25 years, suddenly helps them remember their alien story. I find that a little bit suspect. Pseudo-Lucian, shout out, says the UFO community was the closest Bob could get to be seen as a scientist, something he just wasn't meant to be, IRL. Yeah, he's not a scientist. He's definitely not a scientist. Is he a science geek? Sure, I'll give him that. But so was I growing up. I built model rockets and robots. Doesn't make me a scientist. It makes me a science geek. Victor, when I spoke to Mike Rogers, I thought speaking to him, the inflections of his voice would give away the story as false, but I never got that. Not saying it was true, but it was interesting. Yeah, and again, it's wishy-washy, though. Can we get a definitive answer here? I remember mine ever since it happened, but it's also a very small story. Yeah, and near as I could tell, Bailey Stoner, you haven't tried to make a full-time living out of your story for the past couple decades, like some of these people. It's always suspect to me, right? Yeah, and Marcinio Mandera's here. Yeah, Romanek selling kitty porn. I'm not sure that he was selling kitty porn, Stan Romanek, but he definitely was in possession of kitty porn. And of course, he said that the government planted it there because he was getting too close to the truth about aliens, right? He's in prison right now, I believe. Oh, I did not know that. Renee says, my mom knew Travis before and after. Well, that's interesting. That's interesting. Everyone is bailing. Well, it is, 1 o'clock in the morning, so I don't blame people who have to go. Yeah. Jacobs gets pissed about how small his crowds are a lot. Yeah, he's not a very good speaker, too, I have to say. Like, I've listened to a bunch of his interviews, and he just repeats the same garbage over and over and over again for years. It's like, if you listen to an interview of him from 10 years ago, you don't need to listen to an interview of him from last week because they're virtually the same interview. And it's buy my book, buy my book, buy my book. The whole time he pitches his book while he's being interviewed. It's kind of embarrassing to watch a grown man so anxious to sell books that he has to keep reminding the interviewer to mention his books or where people can find his books and this and that. Don Craze Phase. Stan Romanek is guilty? I think so, at least. Yeah, I believe so, everyone. Bailey Stoner says he's kind of a dick to everyone. Yeah, I've never interacted with him, so I don't know. But I can, reach out to him and try to get an interview again. It is what it is. And as far as this situation with Travis Walton, I think in the next few weeks, we'll probably hear more from Mr. Mike Rogers, because now he's suddenly doing interviews where he's saying, I'm not supporting the story anymore, right? And I just find it interesting that he suddenly decides to not support the story anymore once he gets cut out of the new movie deal. I don't think that's a coincidence. And again, that's my opinion and my speculation. This Mr. Rogers, not that Mr. Rogers, this Mr. Rogers, has made a great deal of money, I suppose, supporting the story, right? And even written a few books about UFOs and stuff himself. So it is what it is. Longtime Travis Walton supporter of the story, the guy driving the vehicle, the truck at the time, and the head of the logging company, I suppose, the boss, Mike Heston Rogers, recanting his story. He hereby gives notice that he is no longer considered to be a witness to Travis C. Walton's supposed abduction. And that's the headline here, really, is that somebody who's been, supporting his story for decades is suddenly no longer supporting his story. And again, I think this is money related. Travis, you got to give that guy a call. Get his money right, man. Get into damage control mode. How much is it going to cost you to keep selling books, to keep making movies, right? How many documentaries have you been paid to be in? How many UFO conferences have you been paid to tell your story, right? How much money does Travis Walton need to make from this story? Because since 1978, I looked at his conference appearances once, and I pretty much determined from his conference appearances, and this is of course pre-COVID, that he can't have a real job, not with the travel that he needs to do to be at all the conferences that he was at for this stretch I checked on. So to me, that means that selling his story about being abducted by aliens is or was, at least for a time, his full-time job. I find that suspect. Yeah, so friends, we're going to wrap this one up here and call it a night. Long day ahead tomorrow. I got to go do a medical thing tomorrow. Yeah. So we're gonna bounce out of here and call this one a quick one. I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us tonight, especially considering, and we had a great audience, especially considering the late hour that we now find ourselves. But it is what it is. These things are going to happen, especially with me at the mercy of two monkeys, right? Two wild monkeys in the form of my children. I had a job once where I would call my wife and say, "How's the monkey?" And for like a year, the person that sat next to me thought that we had a monkey. He had no idea I was referring to my child. So, friends, I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us. Always glad when there's an audience, and I'm so glad that tonight you could be a part of mine. Please do. There's two ways to help us with the show. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and send some of our video links to your friends. Please share our channel link on your social media and ask people to subscribe and join us here. And thank you for helping us grow. And also, there is in our About section, so please do like and share. In our About section, there is links to both Patreon and a PayPal donate button. I was mentioning on Twitter earlier that we've been waiting 8 or 9 weeks now for Twitter to turn our monetization on. And then once they do that, they're going to take 6 months or something to send me some PIN card. I've been hearing horror stories. It doesn't appear that we'll ever be monetized here. And they're removing monetization from other people's channels, I've noticed. Most notably, I think CW Channer has been demonetized most recently. So it really would help if you could help become a Patreon supporter. You get sort of a backstage pass and get to see things before they're made public. We have this Mind Hack system, which is like a personal development course. It's free for Patreon supporters. And really, I do want to thank all the current Patreon and PayPal supporters. You really do make this show possible. The show is at least self-sufficient. So, what do I mean? I mean, I might not really be making any money out of that, but if I need something like a microphone or a light or, software, whatever, there's a few bucks in there from you guys that could help make that happen for us. So I really do appreciate it. I really do appreciate it. It does help. It definitely helps to, at least make the show self-sufficient. 1 second here. Okay, friends. So, as I was saying, I always forget to do that. Please support us. Pitch. I got to make a commercial. I definitely have to make a commercial. So, as I was saying, I'm always happy when there's an audience, especially on a night like tonight where this is last minute and we don't have our usual time slot that we prefer, which is either 9 or 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Tonight we started at midnight, a little later, and we still had a great audience. Always happy when there is a great audience, and I want to thank you very much for being a part of mine tonight. Until next time, friends, my name is Stephen Cambion. Good night, and God bless all of you.